Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Get to the Point Tech. Today we are going to be looking at the Viofo A119M Pro. It is the upgrade from the last generation's A119 Mini 2, which was the 2K mini dash cam from Viofo. And it happens to also have been the one that I've been daily driving in my car all this time. So when I found out that they have a 4K version of the same form factor dashcam, I was pretty intrigued to see how it would do in comparison. One of the challenges that I have with the 2K camera is that the video quality sometimes is not adequate to get license plates when you actually need them. You get a very good picture of the situation, but when you actually need to zoom in and get that license plate, even in the daytime, it just wasn't doing the trick all the time. Now, generally, it was working great for me for the last couple of years, but I'm really hoping the 4K portion of this camera will take it over the edge and make it my ultimate favorite preferred dashcam, but we will find out. In full disclosure, what you see here is what Viofo actually sent to me when I reached out to them to ask if I can review the A119M Pro. But they have no say in the content of this video, nor have they asked for any sway or positive feedback or anything like that. They just said, sure, here you go. And I'm going to take it, run it through its paces, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion about it. Truthfully, with my Mini 2, I never really had the hardwire kit set up, nor have I ever played with the wireless Bluetooth remote control before. It will be interesting to play around with this. However, I don't think at this time I'll be able to set up the hardwire kit. I will try to figure out if I can use it in the near future, but for now, I'm going to put this aside. We'll get into the more nitty-gritty differences between the two cameras in a bit, but for now, the biggest difference is that this camera has a Sony Starvis 2 IMX678 image sensor, which is what gives it its 4K image footage. Look how baby this dash cam is compared to the size of my hand. It actually comes with a relatively long cable, USB-A to right angle USB-C. The dash cam is also coming with this cigarette lighter adapter. It is coming at 3.1 amp max for a total of 15.5 watts, I believe that says. It's tiny writing. Two USB-A ports. You're going to use one of them presumably for your dash cam if you're not hard wiring or doing what I'm doing, which is plugging it into an adapter for my rear view mirror, which we'll get into in a moment. And then you can use the other one for whatever you like. It's a nice touch that they've included a 2-port adapter, even though you only need, one of them. It also comes with a shorter USB-A to USB-C cable. Pretty straightforward. One extremely nice touch for the A119M Pro is that it actually comes with a CPL filter in the box. CPL stands for Circular Polarizing Lens. It's a polarizing filter that basically eliminates or at least reduces significantly reflections and harsh reflections from the dash of your vehicle. So in the event that you're driving in very sunny conditions, usually what you have when you don't have one of these lenses on the camera lens, it actually reflects everything on the dash back up off of the windshield and into the camera. And what this does is it eliminates all or at least most of those reflections. The downside to using one of these is that you have a reduced amount of light that reaches the sensor because it is a filter after all. It shouldn't have a massive effect, but in low light conditions, it could make the image a little bit darker than it otherwise would be. And maybe that's one of the things that I'm going to have to test and see how this does. And here you have everything that's in the box for the A119M Pro. It should be pretty standard stuff that you've seen before if you've ever bought a Viofo dashcam, except for the CPL filter being included. Right now, whether you're in Canada or the US, you can get an A119 Mini 2 for $100 Canadian or American cheaper than the M Pro. And so you're probably wondering if this is worth $100 more than the Mini 2, and that's exactly what I'm going to find out. One of the little bonuses that Viofo provided me was the wireless Bluetooth remote control. This will work with any of their dash cams that has a Bluetooth connection, and it allows you to do a couple of interactions with the dash cam while driving. This is actually a really slick device. I love the matte black finish on it. It has a nice feel to it. It comes with adhesive already ready to go. It's intended for you to install it directly on the dash near your steering wheel. Usually your dash cams are installed in an area that's really hard to reach. And some people turn off the voice control functionality of their dash cams, or their dash cams don't even support that functionality. In this case, this has a nice really big button. And the moment you press this button, it will lock the video that is currently being recorded in case you saw something or were involved in some, in a collision, and you wanted to make sure that that footage doesn't get immediately overridden, as dash cams sometimes do if they run out of storage space. On the side here, we've got two other buttons. One of them is this button, which will turn the microphone on and off. And the other button by default is set to turning the Wi-Fi on and off. It's a handy way to be able to say, okay, well, I'm ready to pull some footage off of my dash cam without having to dig through the menus in the, on the dash cam itself. You could hit this button and the Wi-Fi will turn on so you can use your phone to pull the footage. However, you can customize the functionality of the side buttons. So you can kind of customize them to what you would actually use. Things like you could, set the button to turn HDR on or off. Sometimes you would want to have HDR on during the evening or nighttime, but not during the day. If you are a type of person who wants to manually control that, you can do that here. You can even, switch to time-lapse recording. You could just completely power on and off the dash cam itself, as well as take a photo. In addition to the other two default functionality here. So it's a pretty versatile and very nicely designed little remote here, and I'm going to give it a shot and let you know how it works in actual practice. So now we're going to go over some sample footage from two different firmware versions and also some footage from the last generation A119 Mini 2. In a few of these clips, I will make an attempt to point out some good or some bad parts of the dashcam footage, and in other cases, I might just leave it to your own devices to make a conclusion for yourself. What you'll find is that sometimes the dashcam will do a fairly good job, and sometimes it will do a surprisingly poor job. Here, for example, in this still frame of me turning into a parking lot, you can see that the license plates are quite hard to decipher. In this case though, this was one of the earliest pieces of footage I had recorded, and I hadn't quite gotten my settings down. So at night, in this case, HDR wasn't on. Here you'll see on the left side, the license plate is kind of legible. It's not bad overall. However, in this next clip, in very similar settings, you could see that that license plate is impossible to read. Here, going through a parking lot, I have a freeze frame where you can see that it's pretty much impossible to see the license plates. Switching now quickly to some daytime footage, again, HDR is still off here. You can see that during this freeze frame, it's very easy for me to read the license plate on the car to the right, even though it's quite near the edge of the peripheral vision of the camera. I like to test whether a camera can pick up license plates on the edges or the fringes of the lens. Here's some more sample footage of that. Here you've also noticed that I've been able to adjust the settings, and HDR is in fact on at this time. Here, with a couple of freeze frames, you can see that mostly you're able to pick up the license plates in this situation. In rainy situations, it's a bit harder for the camera to pick up license plates because of the rain on the windshield and the timing of the wiper blades may not line up very well. Here you can see I can't actually see the license plate of the first freeze frame. And in the second freeze frame, you can see the license plate of the car on the right, but on the left it's still impossible to decipher. At night here, you can see HDR is kicking in and you can see the remnants of the license plate freeze frame mixed in with the blurred trailing license plate. It's not perfect, but you can kind of get a sense of what the license plate number is. Here's a typical example of a Ram pickup truck driver who's using the turning lane as a passing lane. Unfortunately, in this situation, in foggy, rainy situation like this, I wasn't able to get the license plate. On the other hand, here you can see HDR doing its thing. There's sun looking directly at the camera lens, and you can very clearly see the license plates from all the cars in the picture. Eventually, we did get a firmware update, so here's some sample footage from that newer version. With this freeze frame here, we can kind of see it's a bit disappointing. Admittedly, HDR is not on, but it is close to sunset time. And the pickup truck license plate is not easy to read at all. And more surprisingly, the stationary car on the side is also not incredibly easy to read as well. So this piece of footage was a bit surprising for me. At night though, with HDR on, we are able to read the license plate of the car to the left. However, that's mostly because behind that car is another car with headlights on. And you can see as the car drives further away, the license plate is no longer legible. This camera also lets you choose a 21:9 resolution, which I was a little bit skeptical of. However, when I looked at the footage side by side, I did seem to notice the possibility that with this resolution, the sharpness around the edges or the fringes of the footage was a little bit sharper. I could not really confirm that in actual usage, but at the very least, what you do get is a smaller file size, because what this resolution is ultimately doing is it's cropping the top and the bottom of the footage, so you don't get so much of the sky and you don't get as much of the dash. It's in this footage where I can kind of say that the CPL filter is maybe a little bit too aggressive. With HDR on, it's still sunset and the footage looks a little bit dark. However, as it gets darker, even with HDR on, the license plates become much harder to read on stationary vehicles or vehicles that you're passing. Sometimes you have good luck, and here you see on the car on the right, very legible license plate. It is a well-lit license plate in of itself. And here, not bad overall. But as you can see here with the Jeep on the left side, completely illegible license plate. Sometimes HDR works for you and takes a freeze frame almost of the license plate, even if the rest of the picture has motion blur, such as this one. And sometimes there's just not enough source light to make it so that the license plate is clearly legible. And so here's some footage from my older dash cam, the A119 Mini 2. You could see here on the right side, I'm about to get hit by a car on the right. And as we deal with that and we try to get the license plate as the car drives away, it's impossible. You can also generally see that the license plates are in and around on the parked cars are really impossible to read. There's a lot of dash cam reflections. Admittedly, the windshield could be cleaner, and I wasn't really using the wipers that day because it wasn't raining, so they could have been cleaner. Here you have a nice clear shot of the license plate in front, but for when a car is passing by on the oncoming lanes, it's just a blurry mess. And in some cases, you have cars like this where I couldn't pick up the plate at all, but it would have been useful to be able to because then they decided to use the highway as a video game simulator. So, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the sample footage. For me, I think this camera is a clear upgrade over the previous generation A119 Mini 2. However, I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. I also think that the newer firmware may have made the footage a little bit oversaturated and over-sharpened. I need to do a little bit more testing, but I don't think I love the new firmware. The older one just feels a bit more well-rounded in quality. Overall though, if my car is in motion but the other car is not, it's usually able to pick up the plate pretty clearly. But if both cars are in motion in opposite directions, it has a much harder time, especially if HDR is off. HDR auto mode is a useful feature, but you have to be careful on when this time is set for it to come on. Early sunset looks bright to the human eye, but to the camera sensor, especially if you have a CPL filter on, it's already getting too dim to keep the license plates crisp. I have to set my HDR to enable an hour or two before sunset to combat this, and it's annoying that the app doesn't make it easy to factor in daylight savings time changes, so you'll either need to adjust this twice a year or find some happy middle ground. I didn't really expect there to be a difference between the 4K 16:9 versus 21:9, but in some sample footage I did notice that in the peripheries of the image, sometimes you get a slightly clearer image. I didn't expect that. It wasn't always reproducible. I need to test that a bit more. Truthfully, I thought it would just be a top and bottom crop, so maybe it's just my imagination. Another thing is that the weather makes a very big difference. It might just be that I have some haze on my windshield, but on rainy days, there was enough humidity in the air that was creating enough haze that the camera was struggling with it despite not being noticeable to the human eye. Overall, I would recommend the Viofo A119M Pro. It's a clear step up from the previous mini generation. However, I'd like to see them continue to work on the firmware because I think that there's still a lot of optimization that can be done with this camera. But even in its current state, I would recommend this dashcam because it is so small. And truthfully, I don't think there's a better bang for the buck dashcam out there currently, especially if you're only interested in forward-facing one-channel dashcam solutions. I would love to see it do better during sunset and at night. Even with HDR on, it was struggling in certain situations, but it's still a night and day difference from the previous Mini 2. And with that, I'll say thank you so much for watching. I apologize for how long it took me to get this video out. Making a dashcam review video was a lot trickier than I thought it was going to be, so it took me a little bit longer, plus I had a lot of things going on at the same time, so apologies again for that. But I wanted to get this out there so that you can at least see the footage for yourself and make some conclusions of your own. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. So for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.